That night, we both said that something happened where we felt like the concrete blocks we were carrying around on our shoulders were lifted off,
Amen.
that we could first express our emotions like we couldn't with anyone else, that we really felt God's spirit among all of us, that we wanted to reach out and help each other.
His
It was
yoke is light.
incredible, incredible.
This is Lisa with Good Grief on Wednesday nights. And today we have a special guest in the studio. Her name is Denise. She's a leader at the Grief Share at Rock Point Church. And I want to introduce you to Denise. Denise?
Yes. I've been a leader for Grief Share now since last January. I went through Grief Share myself and found it to be so rewarding. I prayed to God about what my next step in life would be. I've always had a big purpose through my life. And He really just told me this was the area I needed to go to, where I could make a difference for people. And I could take my talents that He's given me and put it in this area. So that's how I got involved as being a leader in Grief Share.
To share with us your story. Share with us about your hubby.
Oh, I met my hubby 48 years ago. I decided to take an EMT class as I thought it would be good for my medical career because I really wanted to get into emergency medicine. I met him in class and we just sort of hit it off. It was really very strange because at that point, very few women were in the field. In fact, out of 30 students in the class, there were only 2 women in the class.
Interesting. So you were students together.
He had gone through the class before, and he was being what was called a leader to groups so that we got into the practical skills. He could be a leader with practical skills. The funny part is he couldn't take tests. He hated taking tests. And I was more of an academic. So we balanced each other out throughout the training.
Mhm.
And once I graduated, at that point, that's the highest level you could go unless you were an emergency room physician. I was one of the first nationally registered women as an EMT. Of course, over the years, that's evolved into paramedic training, but it was kind of the ground floor.
That's
And
amazing.
it was fun. At one point, we actually rode an ambulance together as volunteers for a track that had kids doing motorbike racing.
Okay.
So we really learned together. And he was a professional firefighter, and he had just finished his probation. Our city's fire department, he had just come out of the service. He spent 4 years in the Air Force, medic. Back then, that's what they called them in the Air Force. He was a firefighter medic.
Mhm.
And he ended up in the town I was living in. So we really complemented each other. My full-time job was
Mhm.
an executive of a Red Cross chapter,
Mm. Okay.
which soon became a big region. I was disaster services. The volunteers that were a part of my chapter would go out to help the fire department when they had a fire with coffee and donuts. They weren't
Right.
really worried about nutrition. So they were happy to get their coffee and donuts. His pager would go off and my pager would go off. That was way before cell phones. And
Mhm.
so our careers complemented one another. I think we've made us tolerant of each other's demands of our job.
So it was friends learning, all this, and then in the community, you guys are together. So it stays friends for a while?
About a year. We started dating in November of 77. He asked me out to dinner.
Mhm.
And that following Mother's Day, he asked me to marry him. And
Wow.
we got
Okay.
married on July 2nd of 1978 and had a big fire department wedding, which
Oh,
is very typical.
yeah, explain that. What's a
Well,
fire department wedding?
they have
You
a
co
fire truck outside with the ladder up and all the department people are involved in it.
Oh, that's
I
awesome.
didn't we didn't have a lot of people outside the department. My
Mhm.
family at that point in my life had gotten very small. My relatives had scattered all over the country. It was small, but it was wonderful. And I still look back on our wedding and feel the feeling I felt that day. I absolutely adored him.
that
So,
love, you always believed, you were always a believer,
oh,
and you guys were one under God.
absolutely. In fact, my
Yeah, so
husband was
important.
Polish and he belonged to the Polish National Catholic Church. I
Mhm.
was Roman. He was supposed to be a
Oh, okay.
but Polish National Catholic priests can marry. So he said, even if I didn't become a priest or did become a priest, I could still marry you. So
So
we
there's
came from the same morals and values, and God
Mhm.
was a big part of our life.
That's awesome. And, relationship under God, there's no describing it that. Roy and I were like that. I can't always articulate it perfectly. It's just divine and it's easy. It's marriage still.
Hmm.
But once we got through all the discussing, we were good. And so I get that. He just blesses us.
Absolutely. And the fact that he gave us both jobs where
Mhm.
we felt like we were giving to our community and helping, it was very satisfying.
Yeah,
And
you
that,
guys were in purpose. You were
yes,
in purpose, on purpose,
absolutely.
from the very start.
Yes, I always said our jobs weren't jobs, they were vocations. That
Mm,
God had set us each on our path and then had our paths come together. So we were very grateful for that.
mhm.
Even through the adversity of my husband's sickness, he was still very grateful to God, and so was I. As we found the resources to help him
Mm.
as we went along. I felt that God laid all that out on purpose for us.
Yes, he strengthens us. If you feel comfortable with that, let's talk about why you're leading grief share, the story of your husband.
Well, it was quite a long road. We actually retired in 2000
Mm,
and moved to Florida from New Hampshire. And he was very healthy. In 2019, he went in for a stress test and they found a little abnormality. So they decided to do a cardiac catheterization. And they had finally come to the point in doing that, they went in through the wrist instead of in through your groin. And 2 days after the cardiac catheterization, they found some blockage and probably it needed to be with a cardiothoracic. But 2 days after, one of his fingers on the hand that they had used the catheter in turned black. And with both of our medical training, we knew this was normal. So
right. Like with that medical training, you're not in question mark on certain things. You guys just know that you know.
exactly,
Yes,
exactly.
when I look at what I was always having to read to catch up, you guys already understood what was going on here. So
And sometimes that's not so good.
right, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. So we immediately called his cardiologist. She called an ambulance and rushed him to Lake Medical Center in Bradenton.
Mhm,
And they determined had thrown a clot and had come down through his finger. So they determined they had to do open heart surgery right away.
mm,
He had some complications. So the surgery was 13 hours, which was very hard to sit and wait. But thankfully, it was a hospital that their recovery unit was actually their cardiac unit. So I was allowed to go in with him immediately after they wheeled him out the operating.
and
So
this is what year? I'm sorry.
that was in 2019.
Okay.
And so he stayed in the hospital for 2 weeks. Then he went to a cardiac rehab unit as part of their hospital, which they had me stay with him so that I could support his recovery.
Mhm.
And then we went home, and he actually had a good year after that. Although the doctors told him no fast food, no smoking, which were two banes of his existence. In December of 20, he wasn't feeling well and had decided he needed to go lie down. He slept all through the 29th. And on the 31st, I said to him, this is not normal. I'm taking you to the, by the time I went out and took care of all the animals, came back in to get him out of bed, he was on the floor.
Mm,
So I ended up calling an ambulance. They airlifted him from, we lived in the center part of the state, and it was on New Year's Eve in the middle of COVID.
goodness.
So the paramedic said to me, don't come. He said, number one, they're not going to let you in the hospital in the middle of the night.
Even being an EM, having the certifications you have. Oh.
Yeah, which was hard. Was
Oh, yeah.
hard to see them take off and that helicopter leaving me standing there because my normal role would be with him to go wherever.
Right.
So, long story short on that, they had changed one of his medications for his diabetes, and it caused a very rare side effect called Fournier's gangrene, and that's in the groin area. So, he had to have two major surgeries. He came very close to death at that. And I have to share with you an
Yeah.
experience I had with God through that.
Yes, please.
Because I was only allowed in the hospital certain periods of time because of COVID, I was sitting in a hotel room and I got a call from the urologist who was going to do the surgery. And he said, I have to tell you, this is going to be a tough surgery. This was caused by necrotizing fasciitis, which is a flesh eating bacteria. And he said, this is life threatening. And I can remember hanging up the phone and God, I can't do this here by myself,
Mhm.
not being with him, not being able to go with him to roll him into the OR. And all of a sudden, I felt arms around me.
Mm.
And I heard his voice very distinctly say,
Audible.
I'll handle this. I want you to put your head against me and just rest. I'll handle this. You'll be okay. He's going to be okay. And I slept through the night. And they called me in the evening and told me that he had done well in the surgery. He would need a second surgery, but he had come through the first one very well.
Good.
And he did have the second one, and we were able to go home. However, through all that, they found yet another blockage in it, which was going to mean either take the risk of a major cardiac event with very little, or have another open heart surgery.
Now, do you feel, and I know I experienced this, did you feel fight or flight? You just couldn't, like, rest? Like, obviously, God held you in his arms and you had that moment, but then you were just going into the next thing and was your anxiety heightened? Like, what did that look like for you?
Oh, absolutely. And as
Mhm,
I've said many times, I felt like we came to the point where I was going to feel that grief of loss of him, and then we'd be
mhm,
back. So there
mm.
was this constant
Ebb and
uh,
flow.
ebb and flow. And it made me understand what he had gone through throughout his career. We had a cardiologist through all of this episode who had been the chief cardiologist for the Cincinnati Fire Department,
Mhm,
retirees and production. He said that firefighters get an adrenaline rush every time the alarm goes off. You and I may experience that twice a year when we avoid an accident in a split second and by an inch, and we
mhm.
have that feeling of adrenaline. They go through it all the time. That's what's strange. I understood it more as I went with him through this. I feel like, can I catch my breath? Oh,
Mhm.
can I let it go? What do I do? Do I turn left? Do I turn right? Do I go to him? Do I come back? Or just sit here in the quiet and pray and hand it over to God?
Right, and continuously hand it over, so it's like hope comes, right? And you're like, "Okay, we have hope he did good," and then comes home, and then the next thing happens, and then that's when you're pulled back, but that's when God is so intimately in those moments and helping us with our strength because we're very weak. I noticed, like, I was just going on God's strength, not my strength.
Right.
Everything was topsy-turvy, there's too many question marks for you. You probably had less question marks just because of the background you have. To lean into God, that was the only piece that I experienced.
For sure. Um, Especially when my children were a distance away. My one son was in New Hampshire, my other son was out here. So I was facing this on my own.
Mm,
And that was something I'd never really experienced before. I had traveled on business throughout my career. This was very different. Sitting in a hotel, not knowing if your husband was going to live or die.
mm,
And through COVID, that was just such a strange experience to begin with.
right,
And then to have all this added stress on top of it, it was definitely very stressful. The only thing that got me through it was God. I
right.
would find myself sitting in the car praying. I would put on music, Christian music in my car just to try and calm my nerves. He was there with me throughout. Absolutely.
He's a good God. He knows your helper. It's just there's so much flood of emotion. And I mean, your person is still here and all those emotions are churning. God does do an amazing regulation. You were a doer and very just in your career, doing what you needed to do and helping. And then you're in this place where you're giving it to, all the staff and to the doctors. You can't do anything, one, because it's COVID and you're not in those circles. You're not helping, you're experiencing the other side of it.
It's a loss of control. I
Yeah.
was
How
always
did
the person in control. I prayed about that a
mhm,
lot. I said, God, show me the way. And when he had his second open heart surgery, he was in Gainesville, Florida. And my granddaughter happened to live there at the time. So I was able to stay with her, with my dogs. He said to God, let me be part of this. And on the first day after his surgery,
mhm.
the doctors came around for rounds and said to me, because of your background, come join us for rounds about your husband.
Praise Jesus.
Yes. And I was so appreciative of that because I got to listen to everything, know everything at the moment,
Mhm.
and what their plan was for the next 24 hours. Unfortunately, in the first 24 hours, he did have a stroke after the second open heart surgery. So I knew we were on another long road. But at
Mhm.
least I felt like I was a participant in his care,
And
which
it remained that way?
it did.
So
It
that's
absolutely did throughout his stay at that hospital, which was 2 weeks. And then they sent him to a rehabilitation hospital in Jacksonville.
mhm,
So now I've toured the state of Florida, and I ended up connecting with a friend of mine who was a traveling nurse and was able to find a rental in the traveling nurse network in Jacksonville that I could bring my dogs. So I had a
mhm.
house that I could go home to every night after I spent the day with him at the rehab hospital. And they
God worked that.
he worked all that out for me. Got him on his that we could somewhat get him to walk.
Mhm.
They were able to take the feeding tube out there so he could eat his first meal again, which was the highlight for him because he loved to eat.
Right?
And he had gone 6 weeks without eating anything orally. It had all been through a feeding tube.
Mm.
So we made these little advanced.
What were the conversations like between you and your husband? Can I
Oh,
ask?
we talked how blessed we had been,
Mhm,
that we had two wonderful boys and grandchildren, and we had a family that loved us, and were supportive. And we both had wonderful parents and grandparents who were involved in our life, and how
mhm.
much we loved each other. It's funny you ask that because the hospice worker, when we finally did go to hospice, now's the time you have to say the things you need to say. I said, there's nothing left to say. We've said it all every day of
I
40,
love that for
46
you
years we've been
guys.
married, you know?
Right.
I didn't feel that there was anything left unsaid.
That's awesome. Because that is one of the things that can happen. You know more than me, but my husband just went incommunicado. His voice had changed, and I didn't get all those words. I'm so happy, joyful, really, that you got all the words. Like you guys talked it out the whole time. Yeah, that's a blessing for sure.
And one of Hank's God given gifts always had a wonderful sense. And
Mm.
so we would laugh about the craziest things. And when he was in the intensive care unit, the second open heart surgery,
Mm.
he always teased me that I was like the cat distribution center, that cats always found their way to our house. And
Okay.
he was sitting in his bed one day and he said, did you just bring a black cat in here? Well, what that's called is ICU delusion. When you've been in the ICU for too long, you start to see things. And
Oh.
what does my husband see? A cat. So his sense of humor continued all throughout everything he faced. He was just very positive, and that was the power of God. He knew God was with him every step.
Well, and I know this is hard, and I'm just grateful that you're here to talk about it. You're willing. So tell us about that day that he passed.
Again, I was so blessed
Mhm.
because we had moved him into hospice. He was unconscious and comfortable, obviously very calm. And his best friend from New Hampshire flew in, and Thankfully, my children and their families had been there
Mhm.
in March, and this happened in June. He passed in June. So both families had seen him before this, which I felt was very important.
Mhm.
But his best friend came and sat with me. The moment he took his last breath is almost okay. We've come to the edge yet again, and something's going to happen, and he's going to come back. Of course, he didn't. It was devastating. We had grown up together. You know, when you're married in your young 20s and you spent all your formative years with someone, the thought of them not being there, the thought of going home without him,
Right.
uh,
The finality.
it was very hard. And of course, my kids flew in and the house was full, and it was when they all left.
Oh, it gets real quiet.
Oh, it
It's
gets
awful, like, deafening quiet.
quiet. Yes. And I
Mhm.
remember the first night I got into bed and I thought to myself, okay, he's just on nights at the fire station. He'll be back in the
Mm,
morning.
right. The
But
nights are the hardest.
they're very hard, very hard.
Right.
And I find myself, I've always talked to God at night. I've always, I mean, since I was little, said my night, good night prayers. And
Yes.
so used to talk to God every night. I'd thank him for the day, thank him for my children, I thank him that Hank had gotten through a day safely or a night safely.
Mhm.
And so he was always there for me.
Mhm.
That first night, I can remember saying, God, you better climb aboard because you're going to need to be right next to me forever here because I don't know if I can do this by myself.
Right.
It was devastating. It
Well, we
was
crawl under the wing of his protection because it's unknown. Probably every other time, we're pretty okay with not seeing around the corner. When it comes to grief and the flood of emotions and you can't control which one pop, right? They just
absolutely.
come in waves,
Mhm.
and in any given day, you can feel multiple emotions. And, it's not like I always wanted to go, "Okay, today can we deal with anger?" And then tomorrow, that's not how it works.
Exactly.
That is tough for anybody that has control. Like, this is what we do in life, and you guys had a routine. At that moment, you realize that everything's gonna be redone, and God's the only one that can take you into this new life that you never asked for.
Absolutely.
Right.
When I joined the support group, the widows support group,
Mm,
it was early stages of that group. It's now a widows and widower group. I remember the person who was leading the group said that the only upside to widowhood was she became closer to God. I said, yes, that's absolutely true.
yes.
And then at one of our loss of a spouse sessions, a gentleman who was very spiritual said the reason that is
Mhm.
because when you're married, that person is the focus that they have to be on a daily basis because you're living together, you're sharing a home, you're raising children, you've got the daily requirements of making life go forward.
Right, doing life together.
Right.
Right.
As soon as you lose them,
Mhm.
God moves into that spot. And I
Mm.
thought, so true. There isn't a blinder between you and God. Not that I ever felt that way about my husband, but I understood it.
I mean,
God,
didn't you feel like it was in the order God, husband, marriage, right?
right?
Family, and then work and ministry are interchangeable. Is that how you felt the order was? I understand what you're saying in a sense of God has to come in and fill all those places where you had your person with you.
Right.
So because you knew each other so many years, he knew when something was off. God knows all these things too.
Mhm.
But that hug or that word of encouragement or whatever needed to happen because he knew you so well, came person to person.
Absolutely.
And then when you start walking in grief, we're like, okay, wait, I'm used to this happening, this hug happening, him being here, the sounding board, chatting over coffee about just what's going on, what we have questions about, talking about getting old together, all these things, talking about dreams, the present, all these things that we talk about. And then all of a sudden it's quiet.
And it's even the little things like holding hands, the
Yes.
touch, missing the touch.
Yes.
But now I feel God's touch more often,
Mm.
almost a physical touch.
Well, that's what the Bible says, right? And very close to the orphans and the widows, right? Like,
Absolutely.
and that sanctification piece that happens going through grief. I mean, he sat me in my backyard for 10 months. Well, 8. And then I said, okay, I can go out and do events. And then I came back for 2 more. But there was a sanctification there. There was a growth in relationship.
Yes.
Right, like, God's like, "And no matter what, I have you." It's like, "I know you know that, but I wanna tell you right now, in this grief, you're not gonna falter. I'm here." And that was very comforting. You can't explain it, you can do your best to explain it, but the grief journeys are us and God.
And they're so individual. If someone
Yes.
doesn't have that relationship with God,
Mhm,
unfortunately, I think they find those months after the
mhm,
loss is very numbing. Even with the relationship with God, you
mhm.
have those numb periods, but he pulls you back and says, I'm still here. I'm walking
Right.
with you.
Well, on those days, you just have those off days. It's a grieving day, right? I was like, okay, Lord, I'm just going to crack the Bible. I'm going to get in a story, one of the books, Ecclesiastes. He really liked to take me to that book because it's all about God's time for everything. That's where I went because I would step biblically. Even if I wasn't feeling it, I was like, okay, what do you want me to do, Lord? How do you want my heart posture? How am I supposed to do this? This is so hard. And it's an individual journey. There's no time frame on it. Any of the things that people say, like, I don't know, there's a whole list of things people say because they feel like they need to say something to you. But sometimes it's just like the book of Job and your friends just need to sit and say nothing,
Be quiet. Sit with
right?
you in quiet.
Right.
Yes. And the interesting thing is, having been raised Catholic, I
Mhm.
hadn't spent a lot of time in the Bible.
Oh.
So reading the Bible was all new to me.
Yeah, so tell me that journey from Catholicism to Christianity. More of this happened after the passing of your hubby? Or
Well, actually, we made a step between Catholicism and where I am now. We went to a church called Unity.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know if you're familiar with Unity, but it's non-denominational. We felt a comfort zone there. It was a small church, got very close to the pastor. In fact, the pastor and my husband became best friends. And interestingly, he passed away several weeks before my husband did.
Oh,
So I said he went first to be the
yes.
greeter.
Absolutely. Yes, I believe that.
So after my husband passed in June, my oldest son and my youngest son came and said to me, Mom, you can't stay in Florida by yourself. You've got to either come back to New Hampshire, come to Arizona. And
Mm,
I said, Well, I really don't want to shovel snow ever again. So I made the decision to come out here. At the time, 24-year-old granddaughter decided to come with me. We flew out here in October of 2024 and we bought a house
mhm,
and we moved in January of 2025. So I came out here knowing my son and his wife and his 2 boys and my
mhm.
granddaughter.
Okay.
That was it. So they went to Rock Point and they said, Mom, when you're ready, we'd like you to come to Rock Point with us.
Mhm,
So I did. And probably the fifth or sixth time I walked in, they were handing out the care and recovery cards. It's talked about grief share. So I signed up for grief share
mhm,
and I've met so many wonderful people. I now have a group of friends, widow friends. So God has opened that door for me to
mhm.
develop more
Right, to
relationships
go out to dinner,
and
movies.
yes, and have people to call and talk to and who have walked the similar road.
There's something that everybody understands the grieving part of it, right?
Absolutely.
Because the conversations are different. If you talk about your person and they talk about their person, nobody's feeling any kind of way, but like, yes, please share. Share this memory. There's a beautiful element to that. And that's why, the Bible says like we're made for community.
It's made a huge difference for me.
Mhm,
Absolutely. I think I would have possibly digressed in my grief had I
mhm.
not reached out and gone to grief share. and met some of these people and now helping along the way myself.
So you came in as a participant,
Correct.
and from what I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, 13-week
13-week program.
13-week program.
Yeah.
So you come in, you're a participant. When does God have you then lead? What is He's impressing on your heart the whole time to help?
Yes. Let me step back for a
Oh,
second.
yeah.
I want to tell you about one of his angels.
Yes, please.
I pulled into the parking lot that night for Grief Share,
Mhm.
and I sat in the car and I just said, God, you got to help me. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm ready for this.
Mhm.
And someone knocked on my window and
Okay.
they said, Are you here for Care and Recovery? And I said, Yes, I'm here for Grief Share. And she said, Well, come with me. Let me show you where the class is.
Okay.
I don't know if I would have gotten out of the car that night, to be honest with you.
That's crazy that somebody was knocking on windows. We know us that you have been in these programs, right, for many years. So for me, 15 years, I know that the parking lot can stall you. Like
Oh,
you'll drive the car there, you'll go, and then you'll leave. You
stuck.
won't ever get out of the car. I've heard
Right.
this story over and over again. But what a blessing for somebody to knock on that window and they didn't just walk by.
Yes, absolutely. So I walk into the room, and that night there were 40 people in that class.
Wow.
40 people. That's tremendous. I sit next to this woman and
Mhm.
we introduce ourselves to each other.
Mhm.
And that first night, she and I have become very close friends.
Mhm.
That night, we both said that something happened where we felt like the concrete blocks we were carrying around on our shoulders were lifted off,
Amen.
that we could express our emotions like we couldn't with anyone else.
Mhm.
That we really felt God's spirit among all of us,
Mhm.
that we wanted to reach out and help each other. Um,
His
it,
yoke is light.
oh, it was
Yes.
incredible. Incredible. And I couldn't wait to go back to the second one. And I felt sorry for the people who didn't come back because they were truly missing an opportunity. Uh,
There's just such tremendous healing and grief. I too went through grief and then on to Grief Healing Choices was Zoom because it was during COVID times. So that's the way that we connected. But connecting with other widows was life changing. And having those tough conversations, many times our pain as widow or widowers, it's very hard for others to hold it,
oh,
right?
it's so different. I lost my father. I was an only child, as was my husband.
Me too.
Uh, and so you know the relationship you have with your parents.
Yep.
I lost my father in 2007 and I
Mhm,
was 48. I
mhm.
was devastated, just devastated because he was the other important man in my life. We were very close. And then I lost my mother 3 months before I lost my husband.
Now, do you feel before so you hit grief share when it was your husband, but how do you feel like you dealt with the grief with your parents?
With my father, I think I was just in a very difficult part of my life because I was
Mm,
making a transition because of health challenges myself
mhm,
from my career to retirement. And I didn't
mm.
expect him not to be there. We had moved into this community in Florida to be close to my parents, and they were lived just up the street. So I felt like I lost that opportunity of now I was going to have time to spend with him. And I felt like that had been taken away. Interestingly, my
Mhm,
mother and I were like two peas in a pod since I was a child, and we
mhm.
did everything together. We would show up places dressed in the same outfit. I mean, that's how close we were. When my mother passed, I felt joy because I knew God had taken her home to be with my father.
How
And
many months after?
well, it was several
Oh, it
years.
was several years.
Um, my mother and father had been together since they were 14 years old.
Mhm.
And although she was strong after he passed, I knew her heart was only half there, that the other half was in heaven.
Understood.
And so I remember walking in the room and she was gone. And I said to her, Mom, you're finally with daddy. You're finally together with God. and what joy you must be feeling. My grief was very different. And I do think it's very different with parents because as a child, you anticipate you're going to lose your parents. As a married woman, we outlive men most of the time, but you don't think it's going to happen to you.
I never
Like you put it on the back burner. It's not going to happen to me.
It really hits home for you to say that because even though my husband was older, even though I was younger, I just never saw him like that he would get struck by sickness.
Mm,
So yeah, I relate to that. It's inevitable. That's the thing. Death, I'm not being negative here, but death is inevitable
absolutely.
and grief, we're either going to give it or get it, right? In
Huh?
those scenarios, many times both, right? We'll experience grief, then we're going to give grief. We don't talk about it. That's why it's so important for programs like Grief Share and Grief's Healing Choices, where we talk about it and learn. We don't say, oh, you know what? This weekend, I'm going to take a seminar on grief. We don't,
No,
no way. Don't
not
even do it.
not in anticipation.
No,
That's
why
for
would we? It
certain.
doesn't even
Right.
make sense, like, for us to even do that, yet every single other thing in our life, it makes sense for us to go learn about something. That one is a rough one because it's too real and we don't
Mm-hmm.
wanna deal I just think it's like an avoidance, obviously. Then when we're faced with it and we go through it, time becomes precious. We understand once you've experienced grief to the deep level of spouse, child, like all the different types of grief, I'm gonna be present. That is the true present, is presence with other people, and you wanna make your days count. It's not like you didn't before. God just says, relation I mean, that's what we don't leave here with anything else, but we do leave our imprint and legacy on relationship with others, right? That we
Oh,
Mhm,
and I found that all my life, but this is very different.
mhm,
Um, After I went through the 13 weeks, I went into deep prayer and I said,
mhm.
God, I know you have purpose for me, or you would have taken me with Hank. So,
Right.
what do you want me to do? And so
Mhm.
I prayed very deeply about that. And finally, I realized this was a step for me. I felt like I had something to give because I'm comfortable talking to people. I'm comfortable in a group. I used to go to conferences and give sessions to 1,000 people. So that's a comfort zone for me. So maybe that comfort, reach
Used.
out to help others. And so I went to Deanne and I said, can I shadow Cheryl? And that's what I did. And Cheryl, after session, she said, oh, you're a natural. I said, that's pretty sad that you're a natural for grief. But I said, it'll make me feel like I'm doing something for other people. And
Absolutely.
even in the widows group, we had a couple gentlemen
Mhm,
that had been coming. They'd sit at the table and just cry. It was heartbreaking.
mhm.
And to watch them evolve through our discussions and letting them talk about the love of their life, their wife,
Yes.
and see them start to glow and
Sparkle, like the
mhm,
eyes get different, right?
absolutely.
Mm,
And I really would impress upon them, change your grief into gratitude. You realize how few people were given the gift we were given of the love of a person, a good person that
mhm,
loved God with us and
mhm.
loved each other and were faithful and caring and would do anything for the other person.
Right.
And so that gratitude really does change grief. Uh,
Absolutely.
and
It changes the whole landscape of it because, array of feelings that are coming. When you are grateful and joyful for the time that you had, it's a joy, not happiness, right? We can always
right.
search for happiness, but joy comes from the Lord. You have a different perspective and your heart posture stays solid. Lord, like you did this and I'm here content in all circumstances. Other people may not understand. Is that real? It's so real because he's so there.
He's just there every minute of every day.
Yeah, and he guides you just to be used by the Lord and be willing to do that. That's awesome. That is from the hand of God, Denise. I always feel like the past things that we've gone through, whether, it's career, just life experience, all that is always training day for ministry. And then when we get into ministry, things are familiar in a way. Being able to convey ourselves is, a good thing. Being able to give that love to another person, right? That unconditional love that only comes from Jesus is healing and just letting people know that they're not alone.
Well, my life has kind of gone in that direction. My grandfather was a funeral director,
Oh,
so
okay.
I was semi-raised in the funeral home because we were very close. I spent a
Mhm,
lot of time there. So
mhm,
I saw people in grief. I saw my grandfather comforting people in grief. And
mhm.
then as my medical career developed, I became a childbirth educator. So
Okay.
I was loving people through birth. And
Mm,
now I'm on the spectrum to helping people through grief.
beautiful.
Oftentimes I reflect back on it and I say to God, your script for me was perfect. You knew what you were doing because every step of the way, I absolutely loved what I was doing
Mm.
and got real satisfaction of loving other people.
Well, I
But,
can tell you when you were saying that, Jeremiah 29:11, I have it tattooed on my arm. It says, "For I know the plans I have for you,"
oh,
declares the Lord, have plans to prosper you and give you a future, plans not to harm you. And, that is just hope, right? Grief can be so dark.
ugh,
But the hope in Jesus and to keep on going, I can see that there's perseverance in you, that you do have that willing heart just to help. You have a servant's heart. I love that because if we don't share our experience, so your willingness to come here and share this story, there's joy in it, there's pain in it, there's all these elements in it, is helping and meet them where they're at and letting them know that they're not alone.
they're
And,
absolutely. Jesus does not let us
mhm,
suffer alone.
mhm,
And I've known that since I was a little girl. I witnessed, very close relatives pass away, and my family always took the attitude of they're with God now. They're the
mhm.
best place ever. And in Grief Shares, Zig Ziglar, as he lost his daughter, and he said, there were days when I felt like Jesus, please let me have a day back with her. And
Mm.
then I'd say to myself, that's so selfish because she's where there's true joy. There's no pain. There's all
Glory.
happiness. There's glory.
Mhm.
There's grace. There's it all in one place. So he
Right.
said, how could I want her to come back here? That's being selfish.
I heard and it was said to me very early in my grief. I was discussing, like, I wish he was here, somebody that had led me pastorally, for many years, said, "Lisa, he wouldn't wanna come back."
No.
I'm like, "Oh, that hurt."
Hmm.
But I wouldn't wanna come back either. Seeing that glory for all the glory of God, I would just be praising, and I wouldn't wanna come back either. So that helped with the acceptance piece of this, and I get the stages and I get the clinical side of this, but I can tell you God is what brought me through grief, and when I hear your story, that is exactly what happened to you, and He keeps on doing that over and over again.
He walks with me every morning when I walk my dogs at 5:30. We have a long chat,
Good for
and it
you.
starts my day off so well. In fact, yesterday we started on our walk, and it started to
Mhm,
rain and thunder and lightning, so we came back, and my
mhm.
day was a struggle yesterday, so I realized I need that time with him every morning.
Absolutely. Well, I wanna thank you for coming on the podcast, and, I know you spoke about gratitude, but is there anything else that you just want to hit home on grief that people need to hear? Anything else?
I think give yourself time.
Mhm.
It's the time is different for everyone, and grief is a journey, and don't do it alone.
Absolutely.
Reach out. I mean, Grief Share at Rock Point is not just for people from Rock Point, and we're having another session.
Yes?
We have afternoon sessions so that if people have difficulty driving at night, or they can come in the evening if they work during the day. So we try and accommodate. We have a wonderful support group that
Mm,
now, because we have widowers and widows,
mm.
we call it Restored Hope.
Oh, that's awesome.
Oh,
Well, thank you once again, and we'll chat soon.
all right. Thank you.
That's another episode of Good Grief, and whew, that was a blessing. Just the story of what God can do for us in our grief and how He meets us where we're at and the healing process. So I will see you here next week and stay blessed.